Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Also, don't forget to check out the Swag Cave, the Resonance Branding Company Swag Cave. That link is in the podcast description, along with the hotline, the Man Cave hotline, where you can leave us a voicemail or shoot us a text. We got a voicemail. We got some voicemails coming up in the later part of this episode of the podcast, along with the weekend hangover. What was the best? What was the worst? What was the highlights or the lowlights from the weekend? That's coming up a little bit later on. Plus, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. Got that coming up here in just a little bit too. But we begin with a couple things. I want to talk a little Packers, and I want to talk a little baseball to begin the podcast. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start it off talking some baseball. Couple things of note. Obviously, the biggest news in the world of sports right now with Juan Soto leaving the Mets, but not leaving too far. He's moving back to the National League, where he is signing a record deal, 15 years, $765 million with the New York Mets. So the richest deal in the history of sports, in professional sports, the biggest deal out there. At some point, somebody's going to break it. I really feel like at some point now, we're going to see a billion-dollar player. But I was reading a little bit here, too. None of it's deferred. It's not like the Ohtani one where it was like 90% of the deal was deferred. This one isn't. Juan Soto's cashing in right away and staying in the big city of New York. So definitely changes maybe a little bit in the National League there. You know, you got the Dodgers. They're going to be big players in the NL West. The Mets going up against, the likes of the Braves and such in their division. At least the NL Central really hasn't been doing a whole lot, I guess, on this surface, although the Brewers been missing some players left and right. Frankie Montas went to the Mets and signed up. Gary Sanchez signed a one-year deal with the Baltimore Orioles, but I don't think that was too big of a surprise. But Willy Adames also officially gone. 7-year deal to join the San Francisco Giants. 7-year, $182 million contract. And Willy Adames moving to the West Coast, but staying in the National League, teaming up with the Giants here. So got winter meetings going on in Major League Baseball, and that's kind of always the big time when you're seeing a lot of these deals get finalized and get done and such. So the big domino has fallen, and now probably a lot more. Some teams maybe like the Yankees and some of these other teams who were like Boston, who were reportedly in the running or trying to get Juan Soto. They're moving on to Plan B right now. Maybe it's some starting pitching. Maybe it's bolstering up other areas of their teams. But now with the big domino to fall, those remaining free agents out there, they're going to be now in play. And maybe some of their prices went up a little bit or not. We shall see. But now everybody else can kind of go about doing the rest of their business. Maybe something like this is going to make the Yankees spend a little bit more for a guy like Corbin Burns or such. Or, maybe like an Alex Bregman or some of these other guys out there who are available. So, but when it comes to, if you're a Mets fan, you're probably geeked up, you're excited, you're pumped up this morning. Maybe you didn't put out or get a whole lot of sleep last night, with the news, because it came. I think Jeff Passan was the first one shortly after 9 o'clock to report it. So maybe you've been celebrating a lot. I don't know if we've got any Mets fans that are listening to us or such, but you're obviously excited. You're pumped. Your team saw them make that deep postseason run. Now you add Juan Soto to the equation. You're excited, and you've got high goals for the foreseeable future, and you should as a fan. But if you are a fan of, say, the Brewers or any other smaller market team, when you see these teams with empty pockets and they go out there and they're able to do a deal like this, knowing that your team will never, at least in its current state, won't compete with that, can't compete with that, does it ruin the sport for you for a little bit? Does it take the wind out of the sails? Like, we can love the game of baseball itself, but when it comes to like Major League Baseball, and you see a lot of this money get shelled out for, because it's always the usual suspects, right? Whenever there's a big-time free agent, whether it was Ohtani last year or Soto this year, we can always kind of come up with, oh, it's going to be these teams, because we know about the checkbooks. We know about, the savings account. It's pretty unlimited for a lot of these teams. So if your team is for Brewer, I mean, does it take a little bit of that excitement out? Does it maybe, remove a little bit of your fanism from watching Major League Baseball? Because I'll admit it. It stinks not knowing that your team is not able to be players in free agency that much. I mean, it stunk knowing that we knew that Willy Adames wasn't coming back just because of the contract-wise, and then you look at it, it's like 7 years, $182 million, and you compare it to a 15-year, $765 million contract. It's like, now it looks like chunk change. But as a Brewers fan, yeah, it stinks. I'll admit it stinks. Now, the one hand, it's like, it's going to be sweeter if your team takes down those big spending teams. That's always the positive. That's always like what we kind of root for when we go up against teams like the Dodgers or Phillies or now the Mets and such, is like, all right, it's going to be even more sweeter when we take those teams down with our younger, little bit cheaper of a team. Now, yeah, Brewers got some money on the payroll. I mean, they're paying Jackson Churio. They've got Christian Yelich under that big contract too, so it's not like they're the Pittsburgh Pirates or anything, although you got the A's now spending a boatload of money. Their biggest contract they've given out in franchise history for Severino there. So, but yeah, as a Brewers fan, especially since it's in the National League, it stinks, and it kind of sucks knowing that you're not going to be big-time players in free agency. Like, when it gets to the NFL, and it was kind of like that for a long time with Green Bay. We know that. No knock on Ted Thompson. Rest in peace. But, when free agency rolled around, you kind of knew Green Bay wasn't going to be players in there either. Once in a while, he'd shock you. Once in a while, he'd pull out a Charles Woodson signing or maybe a Julius Pepper signing a little bit later on and such. But in the last couple of years, I mean, you've had Goody being active. This past offseason, it was Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. Those two are really working out. His first year, he signed up Zadarius, Preston, Adrian, Billy Turner all in one day, and you're like, who the heck is this? What team is this? So that's kind of changed a little bit. But at least in the NFL, you've got the salary cap. Everybody's kind of in play. They've got to spend a certain amount of their salary cap in like a certain time period, otherwise they get penalized. There's a ceiling floor or the salary floor. Excuse me. NBA Bucks, we've seen them be uber aggressive over the last few years, and yes, kind of in salary cap hell, if you will. But when it gets to baseball, where there is no salary cap, and there will never ever be a salary cap at this point, it kind of stinks knowing that your team isn't going to be playmakers or players for a lot of those big time free agents. And yeah, it takes a little bit of a hit. Doesn't mean I'm not going to cheer for them any less or support them for any less or anything like that, but I think we also maybe have to have some realistic expectations when it comes to this team, I guess. I don't know. Like, I just saw Sam Decker tweet this out, former Badger basketball player. I love being a Brewers fan because it's the purest type of sports fandom. You cheer for the team because of what it means to the area it's in, ultimately constrained by margins they have to stay within to prosper as an organization, and you ride or die with results. The Soto deal means nothing to me because that's not the world I will ever be in as a baseball fan, and I like it that way. That's an interesting perspective, too. That's one way to look at it, too. Right? I mean, there's the other side of that aisle. And I think for a lot of us, for Brewers fans too, we're probably just like, it is what it is at this point. It's just not going to happen. And this is the world we live in. for our sports fandom, for our team. We know we're never going to sign a player like a Soto or an Ohtani or anything like that. Our chances of ever getting a player like that is, you're looking at a Jackson Chourio case where you're signing your guys, your younger guys that have a very high ceiling, 2 longer-term deals, and you're hoping after a couple of years, after a few years, it's cheap. And you get to play the system that way. That's how the Brewers are going to win. And that's how the Brewers are going to remain competitive. They have to trust their scouting. And they have to hope that they hit on their younger players and try to lock them up. And after a couple of years, those deals look cheap. That's the way the Brewers have to play it. There won't ever be one of these big-time free agents that are out there. They're not going to be players for those type of guys. It's not going to happen at this current rate. Does it stink? It stinks. Let's be real. It does stink that you're not going to be able to go out there. But maybe you kind of like Sam Decker said, you kind of look at it like, okay, I know it's not going to happen. I know we're not going to be players for that. I get it. It is what it is, but I choose to look at it a certain way. And maybe that's why you're a fan too. Maybe you're a fan too because you don't want your team to be big time spenders, and you like the feel of a smaller market team, and you like the feel of when we take down those teams, or if we do take down those teams, it feels a little bit more of a sticking point and such. I don't know. Jeremy, really quick, says, I think the amount of money for Soto is crazy. He is good, but I don't think he's a top 5 player in the league. You're absolutely correct when you say someone is going to sign for $1 billion, I will say within 5 years. Yeah, I don't know who that player is going to be at this point in time, but it sure feels like, we're at 765 right now. Somebody's going to get $1 billion. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen in baseball, maybe soccer. Those would be the top 2. But somebody's going to sign for $1 billion. And it's going to have to be like another Juan Soto, like maybe a younger type of player who's hitting that market, early, mid-20s and such. But it's going to be, right? It's going to happen at some point. $1 billion. Think about that. Kids, grow up to be baseball players. Not only does baseball not have the salary cap, but you have the guaranteed contracts too. Grow up to be baseball players. Maybe a little bit harder to crack that major league level and to get that, but man, when you can, boy, there's some gash in it. Man. Was talking over the weekend a little bit with some peeps and such. And we were talking a little bit about defensive play, Jeff Hafley, and what we've been seeing from this Packers defense. And I want to give a shout out to somebody I was talking to, Jake, my buddy Jake. And I thought he made a great point when we look at what we've seen so far from the defense, because again, you look at that Lions game, and it was, Jared Goff, effective, short passing game, things were over the middle and such, playing zone defense. It was probably a lot of people just pounding the table like, what are we doing here? And I feel like maybe Hafley isn't able to run some of the stuff that he wants to run. Defensively, I feel like he's not able to run some of the stuff that he wants to run because, for one, Jair Alexander's not out there. But, after that, yes, you have Eric Stokes, Carrington Valentine and such, but, they're not on a Jair level when Jair's healthy and such. So, shout out to Jake, because I thought he hit it on the head with this, and I got to give him credit there because I don't want to take credit for this. But he made the point of saying, I think Hafley knows he doesn't have the cover guys he needs, so that's why we're seeing so much zone. But him and LaFleur are in sync in this, and that, knowing that we're going to play defensively, going to prevent the big plays and such, that's why on offense too. And I don't mind if this was like this all the time, but you're seeing on an offense too, where we're seeing a very run-focused, draining the clock type of offense. I mean, first half of that Lions game, Jordan Love threw it 7 times, was 3 of 7 and such. But knowing that we have to play a little bit of a zone offense and trying to prevent the big plays. Offensively, it feeds into that. You're kind of playing that complementary football where you're trying to drain the clock out and you're trying, to come away with those touchdowns and really focusing and really, putting your offense on the running back's shoulders there. It limits, by doing this, you're limiting possessions for the other team. You're limiting possessions for offensive teams like Detroit and such. It does put more pressure on your own team, in this case the Packers, to make sure you do come away with touchdowns and you do come away with points and you're not going, quick 3 and outs. But I think he's right that Halfley is maybe a little bit, handcuff might be a little dramatic at that point, but I think he's limited into what he wants to do defensively because, when he was first hired, we heard aggressive coverage, press coverage, man-to-man coverage and such. We heard all of that, and a lot of Packers fans, myself included, we were all for it. Like, oh, finally, yes, here we go. But you take Jair out of that, and then you have guys that maybe can't play that. So they're changing their philosophy a little bit and playing a little bit more zone, and it's frustrating. Because I'll tell you what, watching that Lions game, I'm sitting there, it pisses me off watching this Lions offense because they just make it look so simple. They're having success, and it just makes it look so simple, and it was pissing me off. It's one of those, come on now. But I feel like, I think it's a part of the game plan, and maybe he's a little tied up. He doesn't want to give up the big play. We talked about it. It's okay, maybe he's got to play a little bit more aggressive and play that man-on-man and put a guy on an island there. But obviously they don't want to do that. They don't want to give up the big plays. They don't want these offensive teams to put up some big points right away and often. That's the philosophy they're in right now. So it sure feels like when we get to this offseason, whether it's a draft or free agency, I think if it's not priority one, it sits up there towards the top. It's going to be another corner or two. And at this point, I like Jair. I really do. I like 23. I know he probably annoys some fans because of the talking and that, but I feel like, you know what? In this day and age in the NFL, everybody does a little trash talk. Everybody talks. You don't have to like it or not. It is what it is. It's the game now. We see it all over. Your tight end, Green Bay's tight end's one of the biggest trash talkers out there, for crying out loud. But availability has got to be the number one thing. And right now, when you look at it, Jair has not been available for a couple of years now. Let me bring up his contract number here to see what it looks like for the next couple of years and such. But even if Jair is back next year, I think if you're Green Bay, you got to look at bringing in a couple of corners. If you really want Halfley to play that aggressive defense, to play the style of defense that we were hearing about, all offseason we were kind of getting excited about, I think you look at this and be like, okay, one of the top priorities is going to have to be another corner or two. Yeah, according to Spot Track, the potential out for Jair is going to be after 2025? I don't know. Yeah, if you want a lower dead cap, maybe this year, maybe going into next, it'd be a $19 million dead cap with him next year. But then he's only 28. I feel like he won't be gone and that, but availability, man. Availability's got to be huge. And I feel like that's got to be a priority next year, next offseason for Goody to take a look at this team and try to address that cornerback position. Because obviously Eric Stokes they're not all in on Eric Stokes. That's obvious. He's playing now because Jair's out there. But even when Jair's out there, Eric Stokes wasn't getting any snaps hardly. So the former first-round pick sure seems like he does not fit in this. And I don't know if it's just because he's still recovering from that lower leg injury, if that really took a hit on his career or took a hit on his abilities and such, but he's not a long-term fixture in this. Carrington Valentine's a good corner, but is he a top-tier corner? No, he's not a top-tier corner. Is Keyshawn Nixon a top-tier corner? No, he's not a top-tier corner. And I think when you're looking at some of these offenses across the league right now, you got to have at least a pair of solid corners. And for what Jeff Hafley has to do or wants to do on offense, if he wants to be aggressive, that's a position that Green Bay is going to have to look at addressing in this offseason. And I feel like Green Bay right now is, you look at it, their losses this year, all 4 of their losses, I guess you can, for some, maybe look at this as a positive, but, their 4 losses are against the 3 top teams, record win-loss-wise in the NFC. That's Detroit, 2 losses, 1 loss against Minnesota, and the opener against Philly. When you look at standings, those are the 3 teams with the most wins. So on one hand, some people are like, their losses are at least against good teams. But on the other hand, I kind of look at it as, all right, maybe this team isn't ready to take that next step yet. Maybe they're just that 1 tier back or that 1 step back from those top teams. Now, they'll get to play Minnesota again. We'll see if they can get that W at Minnesota and such. But I look at it as like, okay, maybe they're not in that upper echelon right now. Maybe they're not in the Philly category. Maybe they're not in the Lions category right now. There's a lot to like about this team, and I think, there's just, it's not like doom and gloom with this team. The ceiling is so high. And I feel like we're still at a point where if they could just play a clean game, if they could stop self-inflicting wounds and all that, if it just all kind of comes together, this is a team that has an incredibly high ceiling for the now, for the future, for the next couple of years. They've got that. Now, you just hope that they take advantage of that. That's my one concern. Is like, okay, you've got all this young talent. You've got all these, playmakers on here. And for some of them, you're getting by without having to shell out a bunch of money where it hinders your salary cap. And for the others, you're like, okay, for like the Xavier McKinney's, you want to take advantage of the play in his prime that you're getting right now. Same with Josh Jacobs and that. It's like, I just hope at some point they hit that ceiling and they become that team where they grab some championships. I think it's there. It's just not quite to that Lions level yet. They're not there with the Eagles yet. Maybe it'll happen in the next final quarter. Maybe they can go on a run in the postseason. But that's how I choose to look at it with their record against teams this year. Their 4 losses coming away with those. Okay, some may say, yeah, they lost to the best teams out there record-wise. Well, that tells me it's like, all right, maybe Green Bay is just 1 step behind them right now. They're going to the playoffs this year, and maybe they can get hot, and maybe they can run, make a little bit of a run there. But, if it's Green Bay versus Detroit in the playoffs at some point, right now, I'm picking Detroit. I'm picking Detroit at this point. Green Bay got their turnover in that game. When they picked Jared Goff, they took advantage of it. They took the lead. They came back and took the lead. It's just right now, defensively, I don't trust them to hold leads against a team like Detroit. And I feel like it's because they can't do exactly what they want to do. And they got to play that quote-unquote prevent-style defense, that zone-style defense, and hope that they can keep teams out of the end zone and hope that maybe they can, force a turnover and such. And against a team like Detroit, where you got Jared Goff, who's playing at a high level. And for an offense, led by Ben Johnson, who's probably the top offensive coordinator out there in the game right now calling plays, more times than not, that probably won't work out. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to do our weekend hangover. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Plus, let's get to some voicemails. Are you hosting family and friends for the holiday season this year? Hey, that can be pretty stressful trying to figure out what to prepare, who likes what to eat, and so on. Well, you can take some of that stress off your plate by simply visiting Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Whether you will be tackling the cooking yourself or you need some help with preparing meals this holiday season, Hy-Vee can help you out in so many different ways. Whether you want to shop and save some money or you need help with some catering, Hy-Vee in Eau Claire has you covered. So stop on in and get started for your holiday preparations today. Family owned and operated, Toyson Ford is proud to serve the drivers of the Chippewa Valley with some of the most popular vehicles around Wisconsin and the country. They're committed to giving drivers from across the area the best in customer service with a top-notch selection of brand new vehicles to choose from, as well as an extensive inventory of pre-owned crossover, SUV, and trucks. Plus, with their expert finance, service, and part centers in-house, they strive to be your one-stop dealership for all of your automotive needs. Visit them today at 1000 Chippewa Crossing Boulevard in Chippewa Falls.
Well, Capitano, my brother, I'll tell you something about the Green Bay Packers. They're not good enough to overcome mistakes just yet to beat top-tier teams. I thought Jordan Love needed 300 yards, and we needed to win the turnover battle to beat the Lions. He only got 206, and we tied on the turnover battle, and we lost on a last-second field goal. So I think this team can win it all. But they just need to keep improving. They need to keep improving. They can't make little mistakes because against top-tier teams, they can't overcome them. Now we get to wake up, go on the road on Sunday Night Football against another playoff contender. The only teams we've lost to are the top three seeds in the NFC. Let's go show that we can dominate a playoff contender on the road, on their turf, on Sunday Night Football, and show the world the Green Bay Packers are a team that can make a full run to win this Super Bowl. Go, Pack, go!
All right, that is a voicemail from the one and only C-Bomb, leaving a voicemail on the Man Cave hotline. You can do the same by checking out that or calling us on the Man Cave hotline. That number is in the podcast description, or I'll just give it to you right now. 715-303-7364. You can also text the Man Cave hotline if you want to get a text into us, whether it's a question or you want to leave a voicemail with a question, comment, commentary, whatever the case may be, hit us up on the Man Cave hotline over there. So big thanks to C-Bomb. I agree that, they're maybe not quite there. That, Detroit, Philly, I would put up in there in that tier one, and I think Green Bay's maybe just right behind them. They got to learn to clean up mistakes. They can't afford, I think, to, going up against great teams too. You can get away with some of the mistakes against inferior opponents, but if you're going to be going up against the best of the best, you got to play clean games. And I don't think they're a team right now where they can overcome some of those mistakes. Maybe a couple here and there, but and I really believe too that they're not exactly doing what they want to fully do, especially on the defensive side of the football, as we explained a little bit earlier. So, all right, let's wrap up the podcast with a little weekend hangover, and I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. I'll start it off with I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. I'm not saying that the college football committee is always right, but I'm just saying I think they got it right this time. I know a lot of the talk, the banner out there is about Alabama and strength of victory, and that's why they should be in and such. But you also had some bad losses. I get you had some good wins, but you had some bad losses too. And 3 losses on there, compare it to SMU if you want in terms of strength of schedule and that. Those bad losses should mean just as much as your good wins in a lot of areas. So I've got no problem with Alabama not being in it. Alabama's thrown a stink about it, and I would not be surprised if college football changes some of their ways based off of Alabama kind of pouting at this point in time. But other than that, I don't have a problem with how the college football bracket is shaped up. You got Oregon as the top seed in there, Georgia coming in at number 2, Boise State as the 3. They get a bye over there too. So I don't have a problem with these matchups. In fact, you look at some of them, you're going to get some intriguing matchups in that second round, right? I mean, well, first of all, let's go through the bracket to make it easier. So 1 is Oregon, 2 is Georgia, 3 is Boise State, 4 is Arizona State. Oregon's going to play the winner between Ohio State and Tennessee. You know, if it's Ohio State again, that's going to be a heck of a matchup, I think, in a rematch in the Big Ten. Arizona State's going to play the winner between Texas and Clemson. Then you got Penn State versus SMU. That winner will play Boise State. And then Notre Dame is a 17 taking on number 10 Indiana. That winner will take on Georgia. I know a lot of people are talking about Penn State has the easiest path over there. But I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't mind a Boise State and SMU matchup in the next round. That'd be kind of fun, I think. But if I were making my Final Four picks right now, I'm going to go, I think, Oregon defeats Ohio State to advance to the Final Four. I am going to go with Texas taking down Arizona State to reach the Final Four. I'm going to go Penn State taking down Boise State to reach the Final Four. And I've got Georgia taking down Indiana to go to the Final Four. So my Final Four is going to be Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Georgia in the Final Four. So, all right, weekend hangover. Let's do the weekend hangover here. What was the best? What was the worst? What was the highlights? What was the lowlights? All that good stuff out there. I'll start off with the best. Shout out to UW Eau Claire Blue Gold. I know it's my alma mater and such, but what a Saturday for them, because I was at the game. Ken Anderson getting honored before the game for his induction to the Small College Basketball Hall of Fame, the GOAT of Blue Gold basketball coaching over there. But the Blue Gold basketball team picking up an overtime win against Superior in a fantastic back and forth high energy game. So Blue Gold men's basketball winning their 5th straight, women's basketball winning on a last second layup. You had the Blue Gold hockey team that same day on Saturday taking down number 10 River Falls in hockey. The women's hockey team picking up a win. The wrestling team getting a bunch of first place, finishing overall second in their tournament this past weekend. And it was a big tournament, too. The MSOE Invitational, the Milwaukee School of Engineering, second out of 12 teams. So, I mean, just an absolutely fantastic weekend for Blue Gold sports. So they are the best for my weekend hangover. The worst, I'm going to go back to the Juan Soto contract because, yes, let's just call it what it is. All right, let's just call it what it is. I'm a little annoyed that the bigger teams, the rich teams, got richer in terms of talent, and that they can afford to go out there and pay a player $765 million. If it was in the American League, maybe I'm not bothered by it too much. But I'm a Brewers fan, so I look at this, and I look at the Dodgers, I look at the Mets right now, and I'm like, how is my favorite team going to get through the playoffs? It's a little bit of a downer. And that's why it's the worst for me for the weekend hangover. Not for Juan Soto, but for me as a Brewers fan, that's why it's the worst. All right, that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. As always, big thanks for tuning in. And if you could, give us a 5-star rating on like Apple and Spotify. Give us a follow, positive review so others can find the podcast. That's how these computer people work. So until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I'll talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.